नमस्कार, वेलकम टू आवर आरसीआई नवशिखर चैनल। आप सभी का आरसीआई के नवशिखर चैनल में स्वागत है। आज का हमारा चर्चा का विषय है डेवलपमेंट ऑफ कम्युनिकेशन स्किल्स इन पर्सन्स विद हियरिंग इम्पेयरमेंट। और इस चर्चा के लिए आज के हमारे एक्सपर्ट्स हैं डॉक्टर एन रत्ना, former director of All India Institute of Speech and Hearing in Mysore and Ali Yavar Jung National Hearing Institute in Mumbai. He is a very known person in this field and first speech and hearing professional in India. He has done Masters in Education of Blind from New York, Masters of Science in Education of Deaf, Masters in Speech and Hearing and Doctorate in Special Education. He is working as a principal of school for deaf and blind children. He has also worked in All India Institute of Speech and Hearing, Mysore at various designations. He has also worked as a director at Ali Yavar Jung National Institute for the Hearing Handicapped, Mumbai. He is also member of several communities and received awards from various organizations. He has special interest in drama and sports. He has played several roles in theatre films. अगर आप चर्चा के दौरान कोई भी प्रश्न पूछना चाहते हैं तो हमारे टोल फ्री नंबर पे कॉल कर सकते हैं। नंबर इज 1800112008 एंड 26511613। हमारा फैक्स नंबर है 26511609। नाउ वी विल स्टार्ट विद आवर डिस्कशन। सर
नमस्कार। Namaskar. We are talking of communication and hearing impairment. Hearing impairment disturbs communication. It causes a great deal of problems in communication. Obviously, because a person cannot hear whatever people tell him or whatever sounds are coming into him, he doesn't hear, he doesn't understand. That's one very simple, very obvious thing, that communication is affected. But more importantly, because he doesn't hear, because a child with a hearing impairment does not hear clearly, he finds it difficult to speak on his own. He finds it difficult to understand, and he finds it difficult to acquire a language. And those are problems. So it's not only a reception problem, it also becomes a problem in expression as time goes on. So now, the hearing loss, of course, we should know, is never total. There's always some amount of residual hearing. But then we should make sure that that residual hearing can provide adequate information. And if that doesn't happen, the individual does not hear clearly, and therefore he has a problem in receiving, a problem in understanding, and therefore a problem in communication. And this is something that we'll have to always remember. But then we should recognize that the amount of communication defect depends on a number of factors. One, obviously, the severity of hearing loss. The more the hearing loss, the greater the difficulty in communication. The people with mild hearing loss may be able to manage without a problem. I have a little hearing loss, but I manage. I manage more because I have learned to communicate well before I got the hearing loss. So the severity of hearing loss is important, and the age of onset, when a person gets a hearing loss, is very important. Depending upon these, the severity of communication defect can be looked at. Now, if a hearing loss is congenital, that if a hearing loss occurs in very early infancy, then the communication deficit becomes very, very serious. For example, a child who is born, a hearing child, hears parents talking, hears other environmental sounds, and therefore learns to communicate with the environment, communicate with people. he hears and he imitates, and in this process he achieves language, he achieves speech, and his communication develops. But when a child has a hearing loss, and if it is severe, if the hearing loss is at birth or very soon after birth, if it is severe, then he doesn't hear clearly, and therefore he doesn't respond properly, and therefore he doesn't acquire speech or language easily.
तो सर इसका मतलब हियरिंग इम्पेयरमेंट जन्म एट बर्थ भी हो सकती है और उसके बाद में भी इट कैन बी एक्वायर्ड आफ्टर द बर्थ.
ऐसा नहीं है. मैंने कहा मुझे भी हियरिंग इम्पेयरमेंट है, मगर मेरा हियरिंग इम्पेयरमेंट तो मैं 60 साल का था, 60 ईयर्स था ना. मेरा प्रॉब्लम इतना बड़ा नहीं है. जब हियरिंग इम्पेयरमेंट जन्म से हो जाती है तब कम्युनिकेशन डिफिकल्टी बहुत ज़्यादा हो जाती है. ये कोई टाइम हो सकता है, बच्चा स्कूल में हो तब भी हो सकता है, बट ये प्रॉब्लम बहुत ज़्यादा कब होता है, कब हियरिंग इम्पेयरमेंट ये बच्चे लैंग्वेज सीखने के पहले या स्पीच सीखने के पहले आ जाता है, तब उसका सीखना मुश्किल हो जाती है.
मतलब प्रीलिंगुअल लैंग्वेज सीखने से पहले.
हाँ, लैंग्वेज सीखने के पहले या immediately after he has learned to speak, because थोड़ा स्टेबल होना चाहिए. लैंग्वेज सीखना शुरू होता है और शुरू होने के बाद 3-4 साल यूज करने से वो लैंग्वेज स्टेबल हो जाती है. नहीं तो बाद में छोड़ देता है, वो लैंग्वेज चले जाता है. ऐसा तो नहीं होना चाहिए. सो वन, दिस इज व्हाई आई सेड birth or soon early in infancy, then you have a problem, बहुत बड़ा problem. Later on also there is a problem. Supposing a child who is 6 years of 7 years of age has a hearing loss, तब क्या होता है, वो बोलने में दिक्कत आ जाता है क्योंकि सुनने में दिक्कत है और बोलने में उसका साउंड्स स्पष्ट नहीं होता है. Sounds mistake, wrong हो जाता है. He gets what we call articulation defects. His speech is affected. His speech is not clear to other people. Then again communication becomes difficult. But then supposing language is stable, supposing a child gets a hearing loss at 12 or 13 years of age, his speech will not be easily affected, not immediately, but gradually that speech will become affected.
Because he has already interacted with the
He has
environment.
already learnt a language, the language has become stable, therefore he can continue. But he needs to practice continuing, and he needs help to hold on to that language that he has. So otherwise, if appropriate, if people around him, if parents or friends keep telling him, look, your voice is going too high, or your voice is too soft, you have to speak up a little, or speak more clearly, then the child can monitor himself and take care and hold on to the language. But if that doesn't happen, if people feel shy, how can I tell him that his speech is not good? Then what happens? He doesn't know that his speech is not good, and slowly the speech becomes worse and worse and worse, and communication defect increases.
Likewise, condition will be worse.
It can become worse. This is one reason. But then supposing, like as I said, in my age I have a hearing loss, I have learned to monitor my own speech. I have learned to monitor my loudness of voice or pitch, and therefore I can hold on to my speech much longer, much better, in spite of the hearing loss.
पर अगर इंडिविजुअल जन्म से ही उसको सुनाई नहीं देता तो फिर उसको बहुत ज्यादा परेशानी हो जाएगी.
सीखना भी, लैंग्वेज और स्पीच सीखना भी मुश्किल हो जाती है ना. ये है, but then actually I keep saying speech and language, but between the two, speech इतना important नहीं है. स्पीच तो अच्छा है, बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है, इतना इम्पोर्टेंट नहीं है. लैंग्वेज ज़्यादा इम्पोर्टेंट होता है. Actually, an individual can live quite a happy life without speech. Like people who do Manuvrat and sannyasis, they don't speak at all, but they can be very contented, very happy. But without language, nothing happens, no communication. Because you see, language is the most important strength of a human being. And we even keep talking of how language separates the human being from animals and all. Because of language, it's a door to all learning, to all education.
Sir, is it the meaningful comprehension and expression of the
Both. Language has both aspects. Now, in a child, what happens? Because he doesn't hear properly, because he doesn't experience language, he doesn't understand what's going on, he doesn't understand what other people say, the child will not understand language and therefore will not acquire language. And therefore, when he tries to speak, he may make sounds. Sounds to ho jate hai, you know, but then the sounds are not speech sounds. The sounds are not useful for language. This is why one of the things that I keep saying, we should always remember a deaf child's speech organs are all right. There's nothing wrong with his speech organs. His brain is all right, his throat is all right, his larynx is all right, his mouth, lips, tongue, all the speech organs are all right, lungs are all right. But he has difficulty learning to speak mainly because he has very limited language. He may understand language mentally, cognitively, but for it to become expressive, he needs words, he needs language, he needs grammar.
मतलब उनके आर्टिकुलेटरी ऑर्गन्स तो ठीक होते हैं लेकिन उनको सुनाई नहीं देता, इसलिए वो उनका कॉग्निशन लेवल भी ठीक होता है, पर उनको पता नहीं चल पाता कि वो क्या बोले क्योंकि उन्होंने सुना नहीं है.
बोलने के लिए कुछ बहुत सारे होता है, बहुत सारे चीज तो होंगे, बट उसको कैसा बोलना है, क्या उसका भाषा नहीं है ना, भाषा नहीं होने से तो बोलना है क्या, कोई भाषा नहीं होता है. This is the problem. So, but we should remember this because many times, you know, we keep talking of a deaf child as a dumb child or a mute child. ठीक नहीं है. It's not true. You know, the dumb का तो दो मीनिंग हो जाता है. एक है बुद्धिमान लिया, इंटेलिजेंस काम, और दूसरा है मूक, और हम ये भी कह देते हैं बधिर मूक है, मूक बधिर है. It's a mistake. Many schools for the deaf in this country are still called schools for मूक बधिrs or school for deaf and dumb. It is ridiculous. It's not true. The deaf are not dumb. The deaf are not mute. They have a voice. They can learn to speak. They can be taught to speak. But more importantly, they must have a foundation of language. Speech will not be possible without language, because it's only the use of speech sounds in language that makes it speech. So that is very important.
So language is more important than speech.
Excellently, very, very true. Language is the primary handicap of deafness. And we have to concentrate on language if you are going to concentrate on communication for hearing impaired. Okay, now but developing language, you know, when trying to help a deaf child to develop language is very difficult. It is a great challenge. Most teachers of the deaf, that is the main challenge of the teachers of the deaf. Teaching speech is also difficult. Actually, teaching speech is very difficult. But teaching language is more important and is more difficult, but it must be done. This is the most important aspect of any educational system. Provide language, because without language, you don't go into reading, you don't go into writing, you don't go into science, you don't go into mathematics, history, anything. Because all of these knowledge, all information comes through language. And so language becomes most important.
जी, वातावरण की से कुछ भी जानकारी लेने के लिए हमें लैंग्वेज सबसे ज्यादा इम्पोर्टेंट होती है, और फॉर कम्युनिकेशन इट्स आल्सो वेरी इम्पोर्टेंट।
हर जानकारी के लिए, हर सोशल इंटरेक्शन के लिए लैंग्वेज बहुत सारे इम्पोर्टेंट हो जाते हैं. Like if you see me having difficulty with Hindi, it's because my Hindi language is not strong. If my Hindi language is very good, मेरा communication हिंदी में भी बहुत आसानी होती है, बहुत effective भी हो सकता है. But with my difficulty, I have a problem. And this is, but if you think of a deaf child, it's not only any Hindi or English or any one language which he has difficulty with. He has difficulty with any language, no language. I mean, he has to acquire language. And this acquisition has to be encouraged more and more. This is the basic word.
और नए नए तरीकों से हमें बच्चे को सिखाना चाहिए लैंग्वेज सीखने के लिए.
हाँ. Now language में हम ये सोचना चाहिए when we are trying to think of teaching language, ये दो पार्ट होता है. एक है रिसेप्टिव, लैंग्वेज को रिसीव करना.
कॉम्प्रिहेंशन कैसा है, मतलब समझ कैसे रहा है बात को.
कॉम्प्रिहेंशन सब कुछ. रिसीविंग, फर्स्ट पार्ट इज रिसीविंग लैंग्वेज, देन कॉम्प्रिहेंडिंग एंड अंडरस्टैंडिंग, and then there's a lot of thinking involved in it. That's one, receiving. For that, for example, let's say when we talk of receptive language, when you talk, I hear you. I am receiving language, and that is one part. That is hearing. Two, when somebody uses sign language, that also has to be received and understood. So that's another one, receptive part of receptive. But most important receptive language is through reading. Reading becomes very important. And with the hearing impairment, reading becomes crucial. It's the most important skill that a deaf child should acquire. Because once he learns to read, and especially if we can help him learn to enjoy reading, then he will read on his own. He will acquire more and more on his own. And this is the crux of real good education for the hearing impaired. Very often we have a problem. When we are teaching a deaf child, we don't give good language to the child, and therefore he has difficulty reading, and he doesn't enjoy reading. Because he has difficulty, he doesn't even understand reading. I mean, it becomes very, you don't enjoy anything unless you understand.
That means reading is the main method for the communication.
It's not the main method. Reading
It's
is
one of the methods.
reading to me is a very important method for in the education of all children, not just hearing impaired children. Only when a child learns to read, then he can expand his world. Because after all, let's say your world and my world have been expanded through books. It's only now that you have TV and other media. But the information given through TV or other media is limited and very often transient. It just goes off. But reading stays with you. The books stay with you. And therefore, reading is a very important thing. But for a deaf child, let us say, he needs language. He may hear what we speak, and with language he may understand. Or if that's not there, he may learn through signs. Sign language is a very efficient medium for communication. Actually, many deaf people, they prefer sign language. They say sign language is more natural to us, it's like our mother tongue. And therefore we use sign language. Fine, why not? If a child can communicate through sign language, fine. But what we must remember, sign language is also a language. It's not just words. It has a grammar. It has its intonation patterns. It is like all languages. It is
So
an
we have to teach the child the sign language
sign language also has to be taught very systematically.
to express his needs and what he wants to say.
This is extremely important because we want sign language to be able to express everything, not just needs. Because you see, just expressing needs and what he wants to say makes communication very limited process. It's not enough if that happens. he should enjoy. When language is used for so many functions, it's used for entertainment, it's used for pleasure, it's used for receiving information, and it's used for passing on
Expressing.
information. For all this, you must have a very efficient language system. And whether you accept speech or sign language, whichever, whatever, it's your choice. Or the choice of the child or the parents of the child. They choose whichever way, But whatever they do, I believe that the children must receive systematic teaching of a systematic exposure to language. Teaching is not a good word to use with language. The language almost, in my way of thinking, maybe can't be taught at all. Language is acquired. So what needs to be done? The child needs to be exposed to good language, to systematic language, in meaningful contexts, in situations where the child understands what's happening. And when that happens, the child acquires language. And this is what should be done. More and more help must be given to help a child acquire language, whichever way, sign language.
जी
or
सर, हमारे एक व्यूअर आपसे एक प्रश्न पूछना चाहते हैं.
अच्छा,
प्रश्न है.
Okay. Hello.
हेलो.
My question is that what is the difference between language and speech?
Language.
one.
What is the difference
Number
between?
two, how they are related?
Sir, can you repeat your first question?
A lot of people get confused in communication, language and speech. So little bit reflection on that, that how they are different. The communication is different from language and language is different from speech.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
हाँ जी. सर, हेलो. हेलो. हाँ जी सर, हमारे व्यूअर एक क्वेश्चन पूछना चाहते हैं कि व्हाट इज डिफरेंस बिटवीन स्पीच एंड लैंग्वेज, हाउ दे आर रिलेटेड, एंड स्लाइड लाइट ऑन द स्पीच, लैंग्वेज एंड कम्युनिकेशन.
अच्छा, बहुत अच्छा क्वेश्चन है, बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट क्वेश्चन भी होगा. Now, let's look at communication. कम्युनिकेशन तो बहुत बड़ा एरिया होता है. इसमें कम्युनिकेशन कैसे भी हो सकता है. लाइक इफ आई पैट यू ऑन द बैक, मैं कम्युनिकेट कर रहा हूँ, आई एम सेइंग शाबाश शाबाश. और इफ आई पैट यू स्ट्रांगली, आई एम टेलिंग यू आई एम एंग्री विथ यू. यू नो, physical touch is a communication. You can communicate by looking at you. The way you look at a person, you communicate. You know, you can, when I was a child, all my father had to do was open his eyes and look at me, and I would get frightened because I knew his eyes, his expression was enough communication for me. So communication happens through any number of
सर,
senses.
जैसे डिफरेंट मोड्स ऑफ कम्युनिकेशन होते हैं. अब जैसे हम अगर बात करते हैं अपने जैसे फ्रेंड्स वगैरह से बात करते हैं, तो हमारा वे ऑफ कम्युनिकेशन इज डिफरेंट.
No. I'll come to that later. But communication, first thing is this, goes beyond even speech. ये बात नहीं, बगैर without speech also, बगैर बात भी communication हो सकता है. You know, like when you are going out with a friend, and if you're just holding hands together, there's communication. People do understand some things. Like I used to have a friend with whom I would sit for hours together, just sit. He would sit in one place, I would sit in one place, just look at each other. But then we would feel that we have communicated. So communication can happen that way. Actually, in the animal world, communication happens through smell. In human world also, people use scents, etc., for communication. They use ornaments for communication. Now, so communication is a very broad area. Now, in communication, there are different ways of communication. As I said earlier, dance is a communication, writing is a communication, speech is communication. So, communication comes through different ways.
इज अ ब्रॉड एरिया.
It's a very broad area. Within that area, you have language. So, भाषा एक communication में एक part होती है. It's one kind of communication, one mode of communication, one avenue, भाषा. Now, इस भाषा को हम speech sounds में लगा रहे थे, speech होता है. So actually what happens, language is the most important thing. और language को हम speech में डालने से वो speech होता है, हम अक्षर में डालने से वो writing होता है, हम साइंस में डालने से वो साइन होता है, साइन लैंग्वेज होता है, या मुद्रा होता है, डांस जैसा. सो यू सी द बिग थिंग इज कम्युनिकेशन एंड लैंग्वेज इज इन द नेक्स्ट. एंड one part of language is speech. Whatever we say, if you put it in sounds, it's speech. Now whatever the speech is there, you put it in letters, it's writing. So that's what we do. We write like we speak, generally. So first thing, big thing is communication. Next big thing is language. Next big thing, speech. So यही है relationship. Now ये भी इसलिए मैंने कहा, without speech a person can be happy, but without language a person can't be happy, because language is one of the main modes of communication for a human being.
जी सर, communication is a very broad term that includes a various kind of activities. मतलब it's a various ways for expressing and comprehension.
Reception.
And in that, language is included, and in that, speech comes.
Right. Speech is a form of language. Like as I said, writing is a form of language. Signing is a form of language. But language is the basis, big thing. Okay, any other question?
No, sir, we'll continue.
Okay. Now, we have talked of, let's say, receptive language. I mentioned reading. I mentioned hearing. But then when we come to deaf children, they receive language to some extent through hearing. Maybe a little bit they hear. But then they also can receive language or communication through speech reading, what many people call lip reading, but actually is only lip reading, but actually speech reading is broader term. But speech reading, that is, a deaf child looks at you, and as you speak, he understands from the movement of your lips, mouth, tongue, face, hands, all of that. He understands what you are trying to say.
मतलब वो ये हमारे facial expression से
facial expression एक है, और apart from that, shape of the mouth,
movements of the lips से ये समझेगा कि हम क्या कहना चाह रहे हैं.
हाँ. Now supposing like you say ow either, ow, 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 you can look at your lips and say ow. So even if I don't even if you don't hear me also, you can understand it's ow.
सर क्या इसमें लेकिन लिप रीडिंग में ऐसी कंफ्यूजन नहीं हो सकती अगर मतलब जो हम साउंड्स बोलते हैं उसका सेम मूवमेंट्स हो, अगर जैसे पापा या मामा तो उसकी सेम मूवमेंट्स होगी तो बच्चा कंफ्यूज हो
जाएगा. This is a real problem with lip reading. Yes, speech reading has a problem because some sounds look the same. Let's say you said papa, mama. We'll add also baba, baba, papa, mama. They're all the same. So they look the same. So actually, this is one of the problems. People have tried to make children recognize the differences between the sounds with the same movement. Like they have used different colors. For example, pa, ba, ba. They know they're all moved the same way, they're spoken the same way, except for ma, the sound comes through the nose. So mama, the sound comes through the nose. For baba, the voice is in. For papa, voice is only for a, not for pa. So now, when I talk to a deaf child, I can tell him, look, I'm using the nose for mama. So the child understands, oh, he's using the nose, so it's mama. Or if I say, no, I'm using the voice, baba. Or I say, listen, there's an air stream coming, so papa. So this is one way. Actually, there was a very interesting attempt. This was an extremely important thing. An attempt was made by an American. He developed what is called cued speech. Now, in cued speech, he has used, let's say, 8 hand shapes and 4 positions for the hands. And then what he has done, for each, like he has used different hand shapes, one hand shape for pa, one hand shape for ba, one hand shape for ma. And therefore, using that hand shape, people can recognize which one of those is used. And I'll show you now. Look at this chart. Now, this is cued speech. Maybe the camera will have to come closer. See, now these are the hand shapes. There are 8 hand shapes, 1, 2, 3, whatever, but then there are different shapes. And for each hand shape, some sounds are identified. Like, for example, let's say this hand shape, da, pa, and sha. This hand shape is the same for da, pa, and sha. But then when I keep it near my face and use da, pa, and sha, the child looks at the hand shape, looks at the lip shape, and identifies this lip shape with this hand shape is da.
तो ये बहुत आसान तरीका है कि मतलब हम फिंगर मूवमेंट से बता सकते हैं कि हम
नहीं, फिंगर मूवमेंट नहीं, फिंगर मूवमेंट का दूसरा होता है. This one is, for example, you can look at this. They're hand shapes, and this is positions. This is for the vowels. Okay, these hand shapes. Like let's say, look at this vowel string. This is a shape where the hand comes by the side of the face. When this happens, it may be a or o or o. A or o. Now what happens? By looking at my lip, you can decide this must be either a or o. By the shape, by the position. The same way with consonants. So there is a combination. A child has to learn to combine a lip shape plus the hand. This is for the vowels only. The hand's position
hands position
is
and
for the vowel.
lip
The
movements.
shape is for consonants and the shape. So a combination of hand shape, lip shape and position of the vowel helps a child lip read a particular sound. So actually using this technique, this cued speech, children should be able to lip read or speech read 100%. जो आपने confusion बताया, जैसा पा बा मा सब एक ही होता है, हाँ उसको difference को बताने के लिए different handshapes आ जाते हैं.
जैसे ये हैंडशेप आपने बताया कि ऐसे करेंगे तो प होता है.
हाँ.
तो कैन वी टेक द एग्जांपल जिसे हम अगर बच्चे को
ये देखिए ये वाला हैंडशेप
जी सर.
ए करने से म होता है, तो ए करने से प होता है, ब कहीं पर तो होंगे. मैंने अच्छा नहीं सीखा. हाँ देखिए ए फोर वाला फोर दिखाने से ब होता है. तो लिप्स दोनों आता है.
तो अगर हम ब सिखाएंगे तो ऐसे ब लिप मूवमेंट और हैंड
सिखाने के नहीं, इवन हम जब बोलते हैं इसके साथ साथ हैंड शेप भी करते हैं, तब क्या होता है लिप रीडिंग अच्छा होता है. आसान नहीं है, तो सीखना पड़ता है, प्रैक्टिस करना पड़ता है, मगर कंप्लीट 100% लिप रीडिंग हो जाता है. मैं देखा हूँ डेफ लड़की, एक टीचर जब बोलता है क्यूट स्पीच रखे, whatever the teacher said 100% the child could repeat, understand. So इसलिए ये बहुत अच्छा तरीका था क्यूट स्पीच. ऐसा मुंबई में एक अच्छा लेडी था सारा पारेख. What she did was she learned cute speech in English and she developed cute speech, cutes for all Indian languages भी. और मेरा फ्रेंड एक अब्राहम तरकन है, वो मलयालम में यूज़ करके क्यूट स्पीच को मलयालम में यूज़ करके उनके बच्चों के साथ बोलने के लिए, बात करने के लिए क्यूट स्पीच यूज़ कर रहा था. सो दिस इज वन पॉसिबिलिटी, दिस इज वन वे. दिस इज वेयर द डिफिकल्टी यू मेंशन इन टर्म्स ऑफ confusion between sounds, because you can't see, there are some sounds you can't see, ka, you can't see anything in ka. You can't see the tongue going up, or, So then what happens? Chew helps. using a cue, the child understands, there's a cur there. So what Abraham Tarakan did was, he says, sir, actually he had taught his children through speech. And his children learned excellent speech, very good speech. But he said, later on, when they were trying to speak, if they wanted to correct speech, if a word was said, supposing he said the word station, and many children, deaf children, will not say station, they'll say station, because sir isn't heard properly. Sir is a high frequency sound, it is not heard properly. So he may not say station, so he may say station. So immediately Tarakan would said, sir, you know what I do? I use the cue and show that the sir is there. So immediately he says, I forgot sir, so maybe I should add sir. So he says station. So Tarakan said, I have found it very useful for correcting speech. Then he also, of course, Tarakan said, you know, when I am driving, that's when Tarakan is driving, the deaf child, now son, his grown-up son, he sits on the side. And he is lip reading him on a profile from the side, you know. But then, while lip reading, many things will get lost. So Tarakan uses cues and speaks. So the son who sits next to him will understand everything that Tarakan says. And this is the advantage of cue speech. This is one example. The other thing, as I told you, simple touching the nose and this, there are also teachers when they want to teach children, they use colors. One color for pa, one color for ma, one color for ba. There are different ways in which we try to draw attention of the child to these differences for speech
मतलब हम
reading.
सिखाने के लिए जैसे एक तो क्यूट स्पीच का यूज कर सकते हैं.
Oh yes, it has been very effectively used. I have heard, I have not seen the school, but I have heard there is a school in Goa which uses cute speech.
और डिफरेंट कलर्स, जैसे अगर सेम स्पीच साउंड है तो उसके लिए हम कलर्स यूज कर सकते हैं जिससे बच्चा आइडेंटिफाई कर सके कि कौन सा साउंड प्रोडक्शन है.
Right.
और क्या हम मतलब बच्चे को टेक्टाइल से वाइब्रेशंस फील करा सकते हैं?
That be also. Vibration is, ऐसा है, vibration means when I put a hand on the throat, if a voice sound is there, the throat vibrates, and therefore the hand feels the vibration. Or if I put my hand on the cheeks, or if I put my hand on the nose, if a sound comes through the nose like ma, pa, ba, the child can feel the nose, and so that's one way. That's for teaching speech.
For the correct sound production.
For teaching. But when I'm speaking, I may just give cues. But then, mind you, I must tell you this. You know, when people are talking to deaf-blind people, like just Helen Keller. Helen Keller को तो she was बधिरा भी थे और blind भी थे. और उनको speech सिखाना या language सिखाना बहुत मुश्किल था. Of course, language is taught through finger spelling. और finger spelling एक अलग तरह का है, वो reading के लिए, writing के लिए हम बोल सकते हैं. So which is what you said earlier. One finger shape for each letter. A के लिए एक है, B, C, अलग अलग signals for e letters. So finger spelling use करके हेलन केलर के साथ बोल सकते थे. उनका हाथ में हाथ रख के स्मेल करना, like DOLL. So doll होता है.
Tactile impressions.
Tactile भी होता है, वो पूरे hand को shape को देखता है. So that's one. And then what they did, to help Helen Keller understand speech, they did put her hand on her face. Like even now, deaf-blind children, if you are teaching them, you can use the child puts the hand on the teacher's face, and as the teacher says, the child understands what the teacher is saying because of these three examples, plus the lip shape and lip movement that's coming. This has been used for deaf children also. When we teach deaf children also, we have used this. But especially for teaching speech, we have used the tactile sensor. I mean, we use any technique, but ये बात ये है, कोई technique करो और reception के लिए help करना है. Because I've said language, first thing is reception. So if you want to help improve, reception improvement करने के लिए कुछ करो. क्या? First let's say look at hearing. So I said reception includes hearing, speech reading, sign language, receiving sign language, and most importantly reading, a reception. एक्सप्रेशन के लिए स्पीकिंग होता है, साइनिंग होता है, राइटिंग होता है. All of these have to be helped if you want to help a child. Now supposing, let's say we want to start with the reception. How do you help a child to receive well? First thing, you know the child has a hearing problem, help the child hear better. So how do you help a child hear better? First, most important thing, catch the child early, very early.
Means the early identification.
अर्ली आइडेंटिफिकेशन बिल्कुल इम्पोर्टेंट होता है. जितना अर्ली हम आइडेंटिफाई करते हैं उतना अर्ली हम इंटरवीन कर सकते हैं, कुछ कर सकते हैं इसके लिए. और एक खाली ज्यादा टाइम भी देता है, या यू नो, बट मोर इम्पोर्टेंटली जब हम अर्ली आइडेंटिफाई करते हैं हम और बच्चों को बहुत फ्लेक्सिबल टाइम में पकड़ते हैं. You see, a child learns best when he's very small. We talk of critical age.
Critical age.
Now, critical age जैसा होता है, an age in which the child learns best. In Kannada we have a proverb, if you want to bend a tree, you have to bend it as a plant. In a plant you can bend it by, like you're doing bonsai. When it's a small plant, you can bend it, tie it up, and then it will bend like that, it will grow up like that. But once it grows up as a big tree, bending it is not easy. So I'm sure proverbs like this are there in all languages. Now, that is true with children.
सर हमारे एक और व्यूअर आपसे एक प्रश्न पूछना चाहते हैं लाजपत नगर से.
अच्छा.
हाँ जी, हेलो हेलो.
Is that a lot of parents and teachers have problem choosing a mode of communication with children with hearing impairment.
जी.
Sir, I would like to know what are the considerations one should have as a parent and as a teacher to choose a specific mode of communication for their child with hearing impairment. Number one. And number two, the use of AAC, the alternative augmentative communication with SI. What is the use? Can it be used or not? If used, in what way? In what conditions?
सर पहला प्रश्न है कि व्हाट आर द डिफरेंट मोड्स ऑफ कम्युनिकेशन, मतलब पेरेंट्स और टीचर्स को किस तरह के मोड्स ऑफ कम्युनिकेशन यूज करने चाहिए, क्या क्या क्राइटेरिया है, क्या क्या कंसीडरेशंस हैं जो दैट विल बी टेकन केयर ऑफ व्हाइल चूजिंग द मोड ऑफ कम्युनिकेशन.
Okay.
And the second question is what is the use of alternative and augmentative communication?
The alternative and augmentative communication. ठीक है?
Yes, sir.
Now, this is from professionals only, the kind of a question. ठीक है? Now, first, of course, when we are talking of education, I'll have to come back to it later, but this is, anyway, now that the question has come, maybe I'll answer it. As I have, we can choose to teach speech and speech reading. This is the oral method where you say, all right, we want this child to become like us, to behave like us, and therefore we want the child to learn to receive speech as when somebody speaks through speech reading and through hearing aid. Of course, hearing aid is important. And then we want the child to speak. Fine, no problem. This has been done and it can be done very effectively. But it's great hard work for the teacher. But when it's achieved, the achievement is very satisfying, very satisfying. But then we have also noticed that there are some children who for some reason, I don't even know, I can't explain why, some children find it very difficult to acquire speech and language.
सर क्या ये प्रोसेस इससे भी अफेक्टेड होगा, जैसे डिपेंडिंग ऑन द लेवल ऑफ द सिवियरिटी ऑफ हियरिंग लॉस, लाइक अगर प्रोफाउंड है या सिवियर है या माइल्ड मॉडरेट है इन वन ऑफ द कैटेगरीज?
नहीं, माइल्ड मॉडरेट को तो छोड़ दीजिए, वो इट्स डिफरेंट. देयर यस, देयर इन दैट पॉइंट यस द प्रॉब्लम इज affected by the severity. But my own experience has been some children with very profound hearing loss have acquired good speech, good speech reading. But some children with moderate hearing loss don't seem to acquire speech or speech reading. Some children don't automatically acquire. With great deal of support, they do acquire. But so, I'm not willing to say that it is related to the severity of loss. No. There seems to be, it's like this. I have had great difficulty learning to sing. Music and I are far apart. I act a lot. I enjoy acting. Theatre is my very great interest. But music or dance is out. I cannot do it. And people talk of tone deafness. I mean, I'm like that perhaps. Why? I don't know. It's not that I didn't start earlier. I did try to learn music when I was a little boy, but somehow didn't. I mean, somebody even tried to teach me playing the tabla. And when my teacher got to the point of, I think, what he called chaptal, I couldn't do the chap at all. Then he kept beating me on my hand and I stopped music, and that's the end of it. I mean, this is true. Some people seem to acquire music very well. Some people don't. Some people acquire speech very well and some people don't. I mean, this apparently is an individual difference and we can't explain it. But efforts must be made to teach speech to everybody. That is true. But the quality of speech that is acquired is different, will be difficult. That's one. Therefore, what people have done, that's one reason, people have chosen to teach through signs. Now, sign language as a language has been a very effective method of teaching. Yes, it can be, because it's an effective method of communication. Once communication is established, once a language is established, education can be given. And as I told you earlier, many adult deaf people that I know, including those who had learned speech, later on they have said, no, sign language is my language. So they choose sign language. It's their choice. And actually in America now, in America or England, the deaf people don't want to even use the word hearing impairment. They say we are not impaired, we are full. We don't hear, fine, no problems with that. I mean, we can do everything else, everything that we do, and therefore we are not handicapped, we are not impaired, we are human beings. So, I mean, they believe that. They believe that they want to use sign language. They say, if you want to talk to us, you learn our language. Like, if I want to talk in Delhi, I must learn Hindi. I have not done very well with it, but then I must learn Hindi. The same way, the deaf person says, if you want to talk to me, learn sign language. So fine, that's one other way.
That means of communication depends on the individual differences.
Yes, yes. And then, of course, people have tried. See, the trouble with sign language is a separate language. It has a separate grammar. It's not the same grammar as spoken language or written language. And therefore, when a child who uses sign language starts writing, the writing is not appropriate. The writing is not correct. And therefore, people have said, no, if you teach sign language, children can't learn to write. That's not true. Only thing is, what is true is that the child has to be taught to use a different language for writing. Child has to be taught to use a different language for reading. It's like a child who speaks Marathi or Hindi at home, but goes to an English medium school. The spoken language is what different thing, the reading language is different. Why not? वैसे ही दो languages भी हम सिखा सकते हैं. So this is what should happen. So that's one technique. But people have said, no, let's make a compromise. Let us see if we can make sign language the same as spoken language. Let us see if we can make sign language have the same grammar as spoken language. So there was actually one major attempt. Even now, there are people in America who use what they call signed English. That is, they use signs, but then the signs are, they try to use many of the grammar concepts from English and into sign language. Like for example, they say go, but if you want to say went, you say go, ed, went. See, seed, So adding ed makes a past tense kind of a thing. They've tried that. That's one.
सर क्या उसमें बच्चे को प्रॉब्लम, जैसे आपने अभी पहले बताया कि मराठी और हिंदी बोलते हैं, पर ही इज गोइंग टू एन इंग्लिश स्कूल, तो उसमें अगर छोटा बच्चा है तो उसको कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं होगी, कंफ्यूजन हो जाएगी, तो उसको समझ ही नहीं आएगा कि अगर वो आधी मराठी यूज कर रहा है और आधी इंग्लिश यूज कर रहा है तो हाई कॉम्प्रिहेंड एंड वेल एक्सप्रेशन.
वो तो होता ही, that does happen, but I used to at one time, because of that, recommend to all parents, including hearing children and parents of deaf children, I used to say teach only one language. My own children, I taught them only one language first. My theory was at that time that one language is stable well. Both my children, hearing children, yes. But I said, first I'll teach them only Kannada. They will learn Kannada. After that they go to school, they learn English. Let them. And they have done that. They have learned very good English. Not only that, they have learned other languages also. Fine. I believed that then, many years ago. And therefore, even for deaf children, I quarreled with the governments and all, and actually, luckily for us, many of the governments made a concession. They said a deaf child need not learn more than one language. Like in Karnataka, a deaf child has the option to learn only Kannada and go all the way from primary school to doctorate level with only Kannada, no English. Possible. Tamil Nadu, they can do the same. But then now then what happened, these people who studied like that, they found getting jobs difficult. Like a young lady who got a first class MA in Tamil, through Tamil. When she applied for a job, they said, you don't know English, so we can't give you a job. So people now started complaining to us and said, look, because of you, we learned only one language and now we have a problem. So now I've changed my mind. I think also, even for hearing children, I said, no, it's not necessary that a child needs to have only one language. The child can be exposed to more than one language. So my grandchildren, my granddaughter has learned Kannada and Telugu. Of course, her father speaks Telugu and her mother speaks Kannada. So they learned Kannada and Telugu. Then when they went to school, they learned English and Hindi. Okay, so they have 4 languages. Same thing with my grandson. His mother speaks Konkani, my son speaks Kannada. And therefore this child started learning both Konkani and Kannada. Some confusion in the beginning, yes, but then very soon the confusion stops.
But there should be gap between the learning of the languages.
No gap. This has happened together. Actually, now I say a child can learn multiple languages simultaneously. And actually they learn very effectively simultaneously. Like with my grandson, my daughter-in-law kept speaking Konkani, my son kept speaking Kannada. And this child handled both. Not only that, he soon learned, as a little baby, he soon learned Konkani with the mother, Kannada with. And then, unfortunately, he lived in different areas, and therefore when he goes out, friends and all, it would be Hindi, or it would be Telugu, or it would be Malayalam, because my son is in the Indian Navy, and so he keeps being transferred. But then this child keeps getting adjusted, trying to pick up different languages. Now my theory would be to say, if a child is exposed to many languages in a very early childhood, the child not only is able to learn the 2 languages, but not only that, in later age, he is able to learn more languages easily. So multiple exposure is problem. Now let's think of a deaf child. A deaf child can use 2 languages, sign language and spoken language or written language. Why not? 2 separate languages. So bilingual education of the hearing impaired is quite often recommended. Now that's one. There are other attempts that have been made, like science. They have tried to make changes so that they are similar to spoken language. It has not been very effective. Not only that, the deaf people have rejected all this. So another attempt was made, which is an interesting attempt, what called total communication. There what they said was, we will sign, but at the same time we will speak, we will use the hearing aid, we will provide communication through all senses. But not only that, when we sign the same as we speak. The sign language and the spoken language will be the same. That's
जो
total
हम
communication.
बोल रहे हैं वही उसी
वही-
के हिसाब से हमें साइन लैंग्वेज यूज करनी
वही जो
Same होनी चाहिए।
जैसे हम बोलते हैं वैसे ही हम साइन लैंग्वेज डेवलप करके यूज करेंगे। तो क्या होता है, डेफ बच्चा सुनता भी और लैंग्वेज भी सीखता है, साइन भी सीखता है, देखने को लिए स्पीच भी सुनता है। सो हर चीज मिला के एक स्ट्रॉन्ग लैंग्वेज बनता है। But unfortunately that method didn't seem to succeed. Mainly because the deaf people have rejected. They say all this is artificial. हमारा साइन लैंग्वेज हमारा लैंग्वेज है, उसको बदल के आप जैसा आपको लैंग्वेज जैसा करना है, ये क्या फायदा। जैसा let's say if somebody who this has happened in India, the Englishman came, he tried to make our Hindi like English. हिंदी पीपल रिजेक्टेड, नो ऐसा नहीं होगा, हमारा हिंदी हम बोलेंगे, तुम्हारा इंग्लिश तुम बोलो। द सेम थिंग इज ट्रू। द डेफ child, deaf person does not want his sign language, his natural language, to be changed or altered in any manner. And it's true, a language has to be natural. It cannot be imposed. It cannot be changed from upstairs or somewhere else. No. A language actually grows from the people, from inside. So,
नेचुरल मतलब इट्स नेचुरल, ये अपने मतलब इट can't be imposed.
It can't be imposed, and not only that, you can't make changes. ऐसा तो नहीं होगा। नहीं, देखिए ना, बहुत earlier, some years ago, the government of India बहुत सारे तो कोशिश किया क्या, हिंदी को हर जगह में सिखा दे, हम हिंदी को एक राष्ट्रभाषा कर दें। अभी तो हिंदी राष्ट्रभाषा है, मगर हम क्या बोलते हैं, अभी कनाडा वाले, कनाडा भी एक राष्ट्रभाषा है, उसको भी ऐसा ही इम्पोर्टेंस देना पड़ता है। हाँ, एक्चुअली जब बिफोर दिस पॉलिसी व्हेन वो हमारा इंडिपेंडेंस स्ट्रगल हो रहा था, तब इन मद्रास में, तमिलनाडु में बहुत सारे लोग हिंदी सिखाया। क्यों? एक दक्षिण भारत हिंदी प्रचार सभा था। सो हिंदी सीखने के बोलने के लिए हर आदमी तो कोशिश कर रहे थे। जब गवर्नमेंट ने कहा हिंदी को राष्ट्रभाषा करते हैं, हर जगह तो हिंदी सिखाना है, और तमिलनाडु वाले बोले नहीं, हम नहीं बोलेंगे। सो इवन इफ दे नो दे डोंट वांट टू यूज, सो Hindi cannot, no language can be forced on anybody. Not only that, no language can be artificially changed by any group of people. So इसलिए क्या हुआ, deaf people now say, leave our language alone. ये हमारा भाषा है। जैसे एक ये बात भी बोलना चाहिए, बहुत सारे टाइम में तो भाषा को सिस्टमैटिकली सिखाने के लिए कोई रास्ता नहीं था, अभी हो गया है। क्या कोई रिसर्च में देखा है, साइन लैंग्वेज ऑल ओवर इंडिया हैज द सेम ग्रामर, हर जगह वही ग्रामर है, थोड़ा थोड़ा वर्ड्स का वोकैबुलरी में डिफरेंस होता है। इधर एक वर्ड यूज साइन कर सकते हैं, उसको तो अलग साइन उधर का हो सकता है, मगर लैंग्वेज सिस्टम एक ही है। इसलिए अभी कहा जा सकता है, क्यों, हमारा इंडिया में, भारत में एक ही साइन लैंग्वेज है, उसका थोड़ा अलग अलग रूप होती है। लाइक जैसा हिंदी, भारत का हिंदी एक है, मगर हिंदी हैदराबाद में बोले वाला हिंदी या बम्बई में बोले वाला हिंदी अलग अलग होता है, थोड़ा थोड़ा डिफरेंस होता है। पर हिंदी भाषा तो हिंदी भाषा है, एक भाषा। वैसे ही साइन लैंग्वेज एक भाषा है,
पर उसका तरीका अलग हो सकता है।
थोड़ा थोड़ा डिफरेंस होता है ना। एक
जैसे आपने एग्जाम्पल दिया ना हिंदी का, हिंदी एक ही भाषा है लेकिन बोलने का तरीका अलग अलग हो सकता
बोलने
है।
का तरीका, ग्रामर भी थोड़ा थोड़ा अलग होता है। वो मुंबई वाला हिंदी बोलता है, वो ग्रामर अलग होता है। जब मैं हिंदी बोलता हूँ, मेरा मैस्कुलिनिटी फेमिनिटी अलग हो जाता है, गलत भी हो जाता है, ठीक है। बट मैं तो कोशिश कर रहा हूँ हिंदी में बोलने के लिए। ऐसा मुझे मालूम है मेरा हिंदी ठीक नहीं है, आपका हिंदी से इतना अच्छा नहीं है, होगा ठीक है, मैं तो हिंदी तो ट्राई कर रहा हूँ ना। ऐसा ही साइन लैंग्वेज एक ही है इंडिया में, इसलिए इसको सिखाने के लिए सिस्टमैटिक तरीका चाहिए। नाउ नेशनल इंस्टीट्यूट, ऑलिवर जंग नेशनल इंस्टीट्यूट फॉर द हियरिंग हैंडीकैप जो है बम्बई में, उधर से साइन लैंग्वेज सिखाने के लिए अलग अलग स्टेजेस बनाए हैं। उसको सिखाने के लिए एफर्ट्स हो रहा है। और साइन लैंग्वेज, खाली साइन लैंग्वेज नहीं, साइन लैंग्वेज सिखाना है और एक इंटरप्रेटर को भी सिखाना है। क्यों? जैसे मैं बोल रहा हूँ, कोई डेफ बच्चा उधर होने से उसको तो मैं क्या बोल रहा हूँ समझ नहीं समझेगा, क्योंकि कोई साइन बताना था। अमेरिका में क्या होता है, जैसा मैं बोल रहा हूँ, एक कॉर्नर में एक डेफ आदमी साइन करके इसको बता सकता है। सो डेफ आदमी को भी समझने को होता है। बट देन सो वी नीड इंटरप्रेटर्स, वैसा आदमी नहीं है हमारे पास। सो इसलिए बम्बई का इंस्टीट्यूट से ट्रेनिंग के लिए भी कोशिश हो रहा है। नाउ दिस वन, और ये डिफरेंट मोड्स है। नाउ कैसे चूज करें? आई थिंक ए चॉइस होगा बच्चों को देख के, इंडिविजुअल अपने का, जैसा आपने कहा एक, और पेरेंट्स या बच्चा, वो सब मिला के वो चूज करना पड़ता है। अभी क्या होता है, जैसे प्रोफेशनल का फिलॉसफी क्या होता है, वो बताते हैं। एक आदमी से जाओ, वो बिलीव करेगा ओरलिज्म, स्पीच इज द बेस्ट, सो वो बोलेगा स्पीच ओनली। और दूसरा आदमी होता है साइन लैंग्वेज इज द बेस्ट, वो आदमी बोलेगा साइन लैंग्वेज ओनली। और जैसे मेरे जैसा आदमी आता है, ये भी हो सकता है, वो भी हो सकता है ना। ये कंफ्यूजन तो है। बट देन इन द फाइनल एनालिसिस, आखिर में कौन डिसाइड करना है? पेरेंट्स या बच्चा डिसाइड करना है? बच्चा को डिसाइड करने के लिए होता है तो अच्छा, पर जब नहीं होता है तब पेरेंट्स डिसाइड करना पड़ता है।
मतलब सबके व्यूज अलग अलग होते हैं, लेकिन इट्स द फाइनली द पेरेंट्स who are to decide what they want to teach.
ये चूज करना चाहिए, ये तो रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी। जैसा हर चीज में वही होता है, होम्योपैथी लो, एलोपैथी लो, आयुर्वेद लो, अरे कौन डिसाइड करता है? आपका माँ, मेरा माँ, बाप डिसाइड करता है क्या सीखना, वैसे ही। और दूसरा क्वेश्चन था ये ऑल्टरनेटिव कम्युनिकेशन या ऑगमेंटेटिव कम्युनिकेशन। ये हियरिंग इंपेयरमेंट में तो ऑल्टरनेटिव तो साइन लैंग्वेज यूज कर देते हैं। जैसे कम्युनिकेशन के लिए एक ही तरीका नहीं है, हर अलग अलग तरीका है। इसके लिए बच्चों के लिए हम चूज कर सकते हैं एक दूसरा तरीका को ढूंढें। सो वन ऑल्टरनेटिव कम्युनिकेशन सिस्टम इज साइन लैंग्वेज। हियरिंग इंपेयरमेंट में साइन लैंग्वेज में बहुत सारे पॉपुलर ऑल्टरनेटिव कम्युनिकेशन है, अलग अल्टरनेटिव। मगर ऐसे भी बच्चे होते हैं लाइक सीपी चिल्ड्रन और अदर चिल्ड्रन, उनको साइन लैंग्वेज साइन करना भी मुश्किल हो जाता है। तब उनके लिए अलग चीज़ ट्रेनिंग करना पड़ता है। जैसा इफ अ चाइल्ड हैज ग्रेट डिफिकल्टी लर्निंग स्पीच और लर्निंग टू साइन, दे हैव सिस्टम्स कॉल्ड ब्लिस सिंबल्स, या पिक्चर्स रख के, पिक्चर बोर्ड्स रख के बता सकते हैं। अलग अलग तो होता है। What is the place? That decision has to be taken with reference to each child specially. हर चीज को हम बच्चों को देखना चाहिए। ये बच्चा को क्या हो सकता है, कितना उसका
लेवल क्या है उसका,
लेवल्स भी होता है, और शक्ति, व्हाट आर हिज स्ट्रेंथ्स, व्हाट कैन ही डू, हाउ मच कैन ही डू, और उसके लिए हम क्या कर सकते हैं, क्या चेंजेस कर सकते हैं, वो सब डिपेंडिंग ऑन द इंडिविजुअल चाइल्ड डिफरेंस देखना। क्योंकि जैसा मैंने कहा मेंटली रिटार्डेड या सीपी चिल्ड्रन और अदर चिल्ड्रन, द इंडिविजुअल डिफरेंसेस तो बहुत ज़्यादा होता है। इट्स नॉट लाइक, आई मीन वी कांट ग्रुप चिल्ड्रन इन टू स्मॉल ग्रुप। एक होमोजेनियस ग्रुप बनाना मुश्किल है। इसलिए तो हर डिसीजन अलग अलग बच्चों के हिसाब से होना चाहिए। सो दैट्स द प्लेस पोजीशन फॉर, बट communication is the most important thing, and if one kind of communication is not possible, another avenue must be used. इसलिए तो मैं कह रहा था लैंग्वेज और कम्युनिकेशन होना चाहिए। ओके,
जी सर।
आपका कुछ क्वेश्चन है अभी?
नहीं सर, मैं बस इतना पूछना चाहती हूँ कि जैसे सिवेरिटी लेवल है, अगर हम उसकी इवैल्यूएशन कर लेते हैं, अर्ली असेसमेंट कर लेते हैं, फिर उसके बाद में जो हम उनका तरीका देखते हैं उनको ठीक करने का, जैसे कभी कभार हम हियरिंग एड्स प्रोवाइड करते हैं, पर कई जैसे होते हैं डिपेंडिंग ऑन द लेवल के प्रोफाउंड है, तो सर क्या उसमें हियरिंग एड्स और उसको जो हम सिखाते हैं साइन लैंग्वेज है वो क्या हमारे लिए यूजफुल होंगी?
हाँ, नाउ आई एम ग्लैड यू ब्रॉट मी बैक। आई थिंक यू आर अ गुड गाइड, वेरी गुड। नाउ ऐसा होता है, फर्स्ट अर्ली आइडेंटिफाई करते हैं। That early identification also includes appropriate good assessment, testing अच्छा करना पड़ता है, बहुत सारे अच्छा, और जितना अर्ली करते हैं इतना अच्छा। Now once you test properly, appropriate hearing aid choose करना है। Now appropriate hearing aid, जैसा आपने कहा, depending on the level of hearing loss. Not only that, the type of hearing loss. Not only that, the ability of the parent to pay for it. Now आजकल तो डिजिटल हियरिंग एड्स आ रहे हैं। डिजिटल हियरिंग एड्स आर वेरी एक्सपेंसिव। आजकल बहुत फैशनेबल हियरिंग एड्स है, जैसा इन द ईयर, जैसा मैं पहन रहा हूँ, देयर आर 2 हियरिंग एड्स इनसाइड द ईयर। नाउ इन द ईयर होता है, बिहाइंड द ईयर होता है, बॉडी लेवल होता है। नाउ दैट डिपेंड्स प्राइमरली ऑन, सब तो एक ही है, देयर स्ट्रेंथ इज द सेम, एक्सेप्ट नाउ द डिजिटल हियरिंग एड्स are processable. I mean, you can program them, you can change according to the individual needs. वो उसमें तो फायदा है, मगर they are very expensive. अभी तो prices कम हो रहा है, which is nice. But so when you choose a hearing aid, you choose on the basis of what the child needs and also what the child can afford, not only to buy but also to maintain. So this is one. Then hearing aid हर बच्चे को यूजफुल तो है। ऐसा है, मैंने कहा in the beginning, because this is a very strong belief of mine, no child has a total hearing loss. हर child को कुछ ना कुछ सुनता है, कभी कभी बहुत कम होंगे या ज्यादा होंगे।
सर जैसे हमने हियरिंग इम्पेयरमेंट के फील्ड में हमने कॉक्लियर इम्प्लांटेशन के बारे में भी सुना है,
वो भी बता दो। Now depending upon that little bit of hearing, that's residual, we can use it and help the child to hear better. Training तो हो सकता है। Now जैसा hearing aid style में नया तरीका है अभी cochlear implant. Now it's still quite new and therefore it's very expensive. बहुत ज़्यादा पैसा होता है, because and it's also a problem because cochlear implant ऑपरेशन करना एक बात है, एक प्रोसेसर हियरिंग एड देना एक बात है, अलग बात है उसके बाद क्या ट्रेनिंग देते हैं। ये ट्रेनिंग देना बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है, हर चीज, हर हियरिंग एड के बाद हर वो हियरिंग एड हियरिंग जो जितना हियरिंग है, रेसिडुअल हियरिंग है, उसको यूज करने के लिए हम ट्रेनिंग देना चाहिए।
हियरिंग एड लगाने के बाद मतलब जितनी बच्चे की रेजिडुअल हियरिंग है उसको एम्पावर करने के लिए हम ऑडिटरी ट्रेनिंग देते हैं।
हर बच्चे को रेसिडुअल हियरिंग है, जितना हियरिंग रेसिडुअल हियरिंग है उसको अच्छा बेनिफिट लेने के लिए ट्रेनिंग देना चाहिए। ऑडिटरी ट्रेनिंग, एक्सपोजर टू डिफरेंट साउंड्स, स्पीच, exposure to speech, and practice listening to, we have to teach a child to listen वैसा तो इट्स नेसेसरी इवन फॉर हियरिंग चिल्ड्रन. हर आदमी को तो लिसनिंग ट्रेनिंग देना बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है. वी हैव टू टीच अ चाइल्ड टू लिसन, टू मेक द बेस्ट यूज ऑफ जो जितना शक्ति इसमें है वो उसका पूरा लाभ उठाने के लिए ट्रेनिंग देना पड़ता है. सो दैट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. इवन विथ cochlear implant this is true. It's not as if you spend 6 or 7 lakhs of rupees and get the cochlear operation done and the machine put. No. It needs practice, it needs training, it needs teaching, effort. वो सब होने के बाद cochlear implants have been proved very useful. Many children have benefited from it. हो सकता है आगे we are not too sure, but now I think more and more examples are given, are seen, where children are benefiting with cochlear implants. वो तो अच्छा है. Now we have said you have a hearing aid, but like जैसा है मैंने hearing aid कहा, hearing aid के साथ ear mold, appropriate ear mold भी important है. ear mold एक छोटा चीज होता है, but it has to fit the child's ear properly. जैसे मैंने inside the ear एक hearing aid लगाया हूँ, उसके लिए मेरा ear का साइज के माफी उसको टेक करके अप्रोप्रिएट करेक्टली फिट होने के लिए एक देना चाहिए. अभी तो रेडीमेड क्लोथ्स पहन सकते हैं, मगर रेडीमेड ईयर मोड्स नहीं पहन सकते हैं. ईयर मोड हैज टू बी मेड फॉर ईच ईयर specifically. So good ear modes are necessary, good training is necessary, and we have to teach the parents also how to make use of the hearing aid. And one of the most important things, and sometimes my daughter keeps complaining that I don't do it, a hearing aid should be worn all the time. जैसे मेरा hearing aid ऐसा है, मैं कभी कभी टीवी सब without hearing aid देख लेता हूँ. But it's wrong, I shouldn't be doing it. I'm ashamed to do it, but I do it. So, but then parents should realize that a hearing aid must be worn all the time. Okay, now same thing, speech teaching. We have said speech reading, lip reading. Many children do acquire lip reading, but they acquire it only with practice. So systematic practice has to be available. What is the systematic practice? Most important, I mean, this is the most important thing in every way. If you have a deaf child, people should talk to a deaf child, expose the deaf child all the time, in context, in meaningful situations. And then what happens? The child begins to understand, associate the lip movement with an experience, with a communication situation, with a sentence, with words. Then they will understand, learn to. So that also needs to be trained. These are not automatic. So speech reading has to be taught, like for reception. And the same way, even sign language. We see children using signs, but if it has to be used, if sign language has to be a systematic sign language, it has to be taught systematically. Unfortunately, that is what does not happen in many schools for the deaf in our country now. ऐसा जैसा बच्चों साइन करते हैं, उसको देख के टीचर्स बच्चों से सिखाते हैं, वही साइंस वो यूज करते हैं. सिस्टमैटिक का कुछ ट्रेनिंग नहीं होता है.
मतलब डिपेंडिंग ऑन द लेवल हम एक तो बात है कि हम इंडिविजुअल को हियरिंग एड देते हैं और उसके बाद हमें कुछ उसके स्ट्रेंथ्स को ध्यान में रखते हुए उसको एम्पावर करने के लिए हम उसको ट्रेनिंग देते हैं. और बाद में हमें कुछ बातों का ध्यान रखना चाहिए, जैसे कि हियरिंग एड हमेशा पहन के रखनी चाहिए. चाहे हम कोई भी एक्टिविटी कर रहे हैं या टीवी देख रहे हैं, कुछ भी काम कर रहे हैं, तो हमें हियरिंग एड हमेशा पहन के रखनी चाहिए.
हाँ, वो तो जरूर. और ये ऐसा है कि ट्रेनिंग में उनका इंडिविजुअल शक्ति डिफरेंस नहीं होता है. हर बच्चे को बहुत ज्यादा ट्रेनिंग देना है, और जितना ज्यादा ट्रेनिंग होता है उतना अच्छा प्रॉफिट है, लाभ है. सो ऐसा नहीं है कि इसका हियरिंग लॉस कम है सो ज्यादा ट्रेनिंग दो, इसका हियरिंग लॉस ज्यादा है कम ट्रेनिंग. नहीं, हर आदमी को ज्यादा से ज्यादा ट्रेनिंग देना है. जैसा स्पीच एक्सपोजर, जितना बोल सकता है इतना भी बोलना है ज़्यादा. So actually, like I have told people, not only parents of children with hearing loss, especially parents of but even children with hearing, I say a parent should talk to the child all the time, and the parent should talk, provide positive speech to language stimulation. हर आदमी, हर बच्चे को. ऐसा नहीं है 1 घंटा करो 2 घंटा, नहीं.
More and more interaction.
The more you do, the better it is. So this is important. Now, let's go back to this. Now we have identified, and the first thing, of course, when you identify hearing loss, first thing, seek medical, surgical help. Maybe थोड़ा दवा से या एक सर्जरी में या ऑपरेशन से hearing loss को what do you say, get rid of it. पूरा hearing को वापस देंगे, ठीक है, first thing of course. But when that does not happen, तब hearing aid को यूज करना पड़ता है. और hearing aid में भी जैसे you can think of it as reducing the hearing loss, क्योंकि hearing aid तो sound को बढ़ाता है, इसलिए hearing loss कम होता है, क्योंकि हमारा hearing aid उसको नज़दीक ला देते हैं साउंड्स को.
जी सर, हियरिंग इम्पेयरमेंट में अभी तक हमने देखा कि इट डिपेंड्स ऑन द एज एंड लेवल ऑफ द चाइल्ड, और उसी के आधार पे हम उसको असेसमेंट करके और इवैल्यूएशन करके हम उसको हियरिंग एड देते हैं, और उसके साथ साथ हमें कुछ बातों का ध्यान रखना चाहिए.
हाँ,
तो सर, दिस इज अ ब्रेक टाइम फॉर आवर सेशन. विल कंटिन्यू आफ्टर अ शॉर्ट ब्रेक. थैंक यू.
थैंक यू.